California. Today, we're talking to Spencer Sterling. Spencer is a 3D artist, VJ, and all around audio-visual technology wizard based here in Los Angeles as well. He specializes in tour visuals and interactive media and has worked with major LA studios like Strangeloop and Silent Partners to create content for major artists like Flying Lotus, Beyonce, Muse, Billie Eilish, Katy Perry, so many others. Recently, he's been part of the team that's creating innovative XR performances using the latest cutting edge technology. Let's go talk to him. Spencer, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on here. It's awesome.
Hell yeah. Excited to talk to you. I like to start these with some basics. Let's go back to the beginning. Where'd you grow up? What were you into as a kid? Give us the origin story.
So I grew up here in Los Angeles, California, and I didn't really wasn't really into computer graphics for a while. I actually went to school for architecture at first, and then during that time I was like doing lots of like doodling and like kind of getting into some kind of like trippy like drawings and that kind of stuff. And then from there, I kind of found like this whole like GIF art scene on Tumblr, and I started getting into that and making tons of GIFs of like trippy stuff with Cinema 4D, and that was kind of like my bridge into all of these kind of 3D graphic softwares. And then from there, I kind of got gigs with like Strangeloop, and this is still when I was in college, and I was kind of doing like graphic design courses. And then I switched to a major that was more like media technology, so it was kind of involving like computer science and graphics, and doing kind of a lot of the more experimental kind of stuff that we do with graphics now. And during that time, I did some stuff for Strangeloop with like I did some stuff for The Weeknd and Flying Lotus, among others, and some stuff for Flume as well. And then once I got out of college, during my thesis project, I did some stuff with Unreal and Touch Designer, kind of like an XR thing where we did Ableton driven audiovisual graphics that were kind of controlled by an operator in VR that kind of was like able to kind of create music by like dancing around and like kind of guiding the visuals that were actually being triggered from Ableton. So kind of like a DJ and a VJ could kind of collaborate in some sort of virtual space that then could be filmed in kind of an XR fashion with the green screen. And from there, Notch was kind of just becoming a thing, kind of just transitioning from being like Demolition, which is this kind of weird demo tool, to actually being like a real tool. And I got in on that pretty early on in the game and really just got obsessed with that program. And that kind of led me to jobs with Silent Partners. And then from there, I've just been doing tons of stuff with them. So yeah, that's pretty much how I got here.
Damn. All right. Yeah, that's quite the overview. So that's interesting. You were first going to school for architecture, and discovered some like this GIF art scene while you were there, and that what sort of that's what got you like opened your eyes to this like graphic design and motion graphics kind of world?
Yeah, pretty much. So I started looking at artists, like the first ones I kind of saw were like Hexiosis and like the 30,000 FPS guys, and they did some really cool stuff. And I started to learn Cinema 4D because it seemed like kind of the tool to learn for this kind of stuff. And yeah, I would make quite a few GIFs per day. Like I would release almost 10 a day for a period of time. Like there was months where I put out over 100 GIFs just
People's
for fun.
Got nothing on you, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I would just kind of just make them all day. I was kind of in between, like I wasn't even really looking for jobs at one point in between college and like working for Silent Partners. I would just make tons and tons of stuff in my free time. It was just tons of fun to kind of explore the software. I like to kind of not have an idea of what I really want to make. I like kind of to just see what the software can do and just kind of explore from there. So it was really fun to kind of discover Cinema 4D and what it can do, and just kind of making things as I kind of do that. And yeah, that's kind of was my gateway into all this kind of stuff. And yeah.
And so while you were doing that, that led you to hooking up with Strangeloop. What's the story behind that?
Oh yeah,
that connection.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think I met him at a show. It was in LA. I want to say it was probably maybe at the Fonda. I'm not sure. I think it was a Gas Lamp Killer show. And I met him in the bathroom, and I was like, "Hey, are you a Strangeloop?" And he was like, "Yeah." And then I told him, "I'm like, I make some trippy gifts. We should hang out sometime. I should talk to you." He's like, "Yeah, sure." And then we exchanged information. I've showed him my Tumblr page, and I was starting to make stuff for him pretty quickly after that. So it's pretty cool. I went over to his place and like hung out a little bit, and then yeah, we started making some stuff.
That's cool. Man,
yeah, really it was cool. Interesting. It's kind of one of those like weird, I guess, LA moments where you like meet some random person that you want to work with, like just out and about. Yeah. I'd seen him at Low End Theory a few times as well. I used to go to Low End Theory quite a lot. Okay. So yeah, I recognized him.
Nice. So you were pretty into like the music scene and just artists that would have kind of trippy visuals and stuff already. So you're kind of aware of that scene as well.
Yeah. I was starting to kind of get kind of more focused on that kind of stuff, and yeah, it's kind of in the right place at the right time to kind of get into it a bit.
Nice. And then remind me, what did you switch your degree to?
Yeah, so first I switched from architecture to graphic design. So I did a year of architecture, then a year of graphic design, and then I switched it to media technology, which is kind of like it's like computer science mixed with art. So we learned stuff like Python and open frameworks, and we did a bit of Touch Designer at the end too. I was actually just a teacher's assistant for that course. The class before my class, they actually did teach D3, which is pretty cool. But it was kind of a bad experience dealing with that, like an educational facility dealing with the kind of craziness of tours. Like it kind of ropes you into that in a crazy way if you start to like borrow their machines. So they didn't continue that for my education, but we did all kinds of cool installations and stuff with other tools like Malumin. And yeah, we did lots of like processing, Arduino stuff, kind of exploring all kinds of different things. And then for our thesis project, we could kind of just do whatever we want. So I jumped headfirst into virtual reality and Unreal, and had to learn a little bit of Touch Designer along the way as well to make it all kind of come together to do what I wanted to do. So it's kind of fun. It's very much the kind of program where you have to teach yourself kind of what you know, like to meet the minimum requirements of what's expected is fairly straightforward. But if you want to like actually, if you're passionate about it and want to like really make cool stuff, you got to like go the extra mile and like learn some extra stuff and really get into it. So it was a great program. I can't recommend it enough. It was pretty cool. And that was at Woodbury University in Burbank.
Nice. That was going to be my next question.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. That's pretty awesome that you had access to a program that like where you could study all these different programs. I don't think I know what half of those are still, and I don't think I knew what most of those were until like I was out of school. That's pretty awesome. A lot of the programs that I was exposed to were like still very traditional graphic design focused. That's pretty awesome. Yeah, tell me a little bit about the thesis project and like what inspired you to do that. What your goal was there, and did anything come out of that afterwards?
Yeah, so actually, it's kind of interesting. The whole kind of inspiration for all of this is just me listening to music basically, and kind of having these like creative visions in my head as I listen to music, and trying to see what I can do to actually like replicate that experience or extend it in a way to create something interesting. Because usually these things are kind of just like fleeting visions you have. You can't really even act on them fast enough to create anything or even remember it. So I kind of wanted to create a system where a musician and a artist could like actually collaborate in real time to create a show that would kind of create that kind of same experience, so that uh, essentially the musician could have controls over some effects and stuff on their end, and that would be able to influence the visuals, and the visuals would be able to kind of react to that as well, and the visualist would have some sort of control as well to kind of be the glue that kind of keeps it all together. And it's kind of about making being bigger than the sum of its parts in terms of audio and the visuals, and kind of those things interacting together and really becoming like one, and really working together. And that kind of first attempt at this actually kind of I've been continuing it since then. I haven't really gone back to the interactive like VR camera track part of it, but I've kind of developed that same kind of system specifically with linking to Ableton to create audiovisual systems I can use to drive my own little shows as well. So that was kind of the beginning of like the Ableton integration, and since then I've taken it a lot further, and now I essentially have like audiovisual instruments inside of Ableton that connect via OSC to stuff like Notch and Unreal. So that was kind of the very beginning of it, and then now it's kind of gotten a bit more. It's gone farther and gotten more complex, but it's still kind of true to the same idea that I am controlling visuals using music software and being able to kind of improvise as I go and create stuff. I still want to kind of have a more tailored experience. I've only done this once or twice where I've worked with an artist to create an audiovisual set where I will take their Ableton set and then add controls onto their effects that influence the visuals, and then I'll create an entire visual set that's tied into Ableton, so they're the ones actually controlling the playback of the visuals just by playing their songs in Ableton the way they normally would. So that's kind of the goal, is to really just merge the two things and make it so that the VJ and the DJ can both actually contribute creatively at the same time and improvise with each other. And it's not as much of just the VJ reacting, but like a conversation between what the DJ is doing, what the VJ is doing, so they can both kind of work together in real time to kind of make something work audio and visually.
It's a really cool concept, because that is one of the big challenges of being a VJ, is you're sort of inherently one step behind. You can kind of do what you can to anticipate what the what the artist is going to do, or if you know their set, and you could get time code and things like that, but that kind of brings that takes away from the live improvisational aspect of it. It's like this push and pull, but finding a new way to connect those things is really cool. Were you VJing before you came up with this concept? Like, had you had some experience doing like the Resolume thing at like clubs or raves or anything like that?
I did a lot of Resolume. It was mostly at really small stuff. I never really got super deep into doing it for big shows, but I did do it at a few small raves and stuff like that. I never was like super crazy into Resolume and doing a lot of stuff with it, but I knew the basics. I did some projection mapping gigs as well with Resolume, just because it's so easy to make that happen in Resolume. But yeah, I did a few, and that was kind of one of the things too I discovered, is like, yeah, you're always kind of one step behind, just trying to react as quickly as you can. Sometimes you can really predict what's kind of going on, especially if you've worked with the artist before. But in general, it's kind of hard to be able to be as reactive as you would actually want to be. So, yeah.
Hell yeah, that's cool. So let's go back to the timeline a little bit. You mentioned I think like towards the end of college, you started discovering Notch and getting kind of obsessed with that, and that is, I assume that's sort of what led you into what you're doing now with Silent Partners and XR and things like that, is because it's pretty heavily based on Notch. Um, Tell us a little bit about that. How did you find out about Notch and what is so interesting about it to you?
Yeah, so the chair of the media technology program at Woodbury, he told me about Notch, and then another teacher, also when it was called Demolition, told me about Demolition, which was Emery, and then he kind of showed me some of the like crazy like real time effects you could do at the time. And then as soon as I finished my thesis project, I just went completely into Notch because I was totally in Unreal Engine for that project. And I was like, wow, this is a really tough tool to make content in. And it seems like I'm not able to create things fast enough and really react and do what I want to do. It's like always a science project every step of the way of like everything you want to do. And being already experienced with Cinema 4D, I saw that Notch like had things like cloners and like the parent-child relationship was kind of all the same. Very, very like inspired by Cinema 4D and kind of like it's like a bunch of different programs mixed together, but then also in real time. So it kind of just seemed like it was too good to be true. And then once I got into it, I was like, okay, this is pretty amazing. It's a bit buggy, but it's pretty amazing. And it definitely had a lot of features that it was lacking in a lot of features, essentially. But I quickly got really good at it because it is one of the more intuitive programs to learn. I found it can be a bit like vague sometimes about what you actually need to do to get something kind of working, but just by kind of going through trial and error and figuring everything out, kind of I wasn't even really looking for a job. I just wanted to get good at Notch just for fun, really. And between graduating and then working at Silent Partners. So I spent a few months just making tons of crazy stuff with Notch as I normally would with Cinema 4D, but it was so much more, there was so much more freedom to it because I didn't have these crazy long Octane render times and everything. And like the working with Octane in general was like, it's amazing what it can create, but it is truly a nightmare working in Octane in production because like
Agree.
if you like you have like a 10-minute like sequence or something and it takes like a week to render and then you finish your render and at the end you're like, holy crap, this is totally messed up. Like I need to figure out a way to cut corners and like bend space and time in order to make this render happen now. So it's crazy. And I was really frustrated by that. And also just like, I was like, this should be easier than it is with technology. And then Notch came along and I was like, okay, this is the actual way we can kind of do this. It's not totally photorealistic, but it's pretty close. And now with ray tracing and everything that it can do, it's a pretty amazing tool. And it is kind of prohibitively expensive for a lot of people, but I was able to get a job just with the learning license, essentially. So I would say it's not as prohibitively expensive as you would think if you're thinking about getting into it. And I would say it's one of the best real-time tools to learn, just because if you just want to get your ideas out there and just create stuff, it is really fun. And the tools that are available in Notch kind of lend themselves to creating really interesting and amazing content, especially if you don't have an idea in mind, because it has so many crazy cool effects that you can play with and really manipulate. You don't necessarily have to have an idea and then kind of continuously act on it. You have to you can just kind of start at a certain point and just kind of build up stuff and then take away stuff and iterate very easily. All that stuff is not the case with, Unreal and Octane and stuff like that. It's just much more time consuming. You have to really commit to exactly what you want in those programs, I felt. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was kind of fun. I spent a lot of time learning Notch and just playing around with it and posting stuff on the Facebook group. And that's kind of how JT from Silent Partners found me and then reached out to me. And then, then from there I was doing tons of stuff with them because it's pretty hard to find good Notch designers, especially in the Los Angeles area. So immediately I was getting all kinds of really cool gigs with them.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that was, man. I remember the first time I started playing with Notch, I like made some particle system, and I was like, this isn't fair. Like I I basically redid a week's worth of like of X particles renders in like an afternoon. It's like, what the, this is awesome, but this is not fair. What the hell? Where was
Yeah.
this? Where was this hiding? And yeah, same thing. I had the learning license myself and was like working with a studio that had a couple licenses, so I'd, make real things when I was there, but I learned how to do it just with like, yeah, the learning thing, which isn't too bad. Um, Very cool program though, and yeah, the iteration and just being able to play and everything kind of works together, so you can just plug shit in and see what happens and have some happy accidents. Really exciting program. Um, awesome. So so you're just posting things on the Facebook group, and Silent Partners kind of heard of you through that, saw you in there and checked it out. It is like a, being a new program and sort of a specialty thing. It is still like a pretty tight knit group of people. Um, so if you're active in a community like that, that's a really good tip for how to get noticed. Do you remember
Yeah.
like what the piece was, or was there like did they reach out to you? Did you reach out to them? Do you remember how that happened and like what those first sort of gigs were like with them?
Yeah, they reached out to me just to come by and kind of for like an interview after I posted a few different videos. Most of them were kind of audio reactive videos, and then I can't remember. I think the Notchmeister stuff happened later, but that was kind of, actually no, I think that happened before I got the job. But that was kind of a full on, like, I think it was about 30 seconds, but it was essentially like a very meticulous kind of music video that I made in Notch. And the first thing I've kind of ever done like that, or it was like a real, like I really keyframed out the whole thing and tried to really line it up to the music and all that stuff. And I feel like that one definitely got a lot of attention on the Facebook group and some of the other posts I did as well. And so that caught JT's attention, and then he reached out to me. And the first thing I did for them was for some upfronts for Fox. And it was actually some interactive Connect pieces. And I had already created a bunch of different Connect looks that I was messing around with on my own, and so it was kind of fun to kind of create some different looks for that. And it was interesting. It wasn't really super branded content; like it was actually pretty open and like trippy kind of stuff. So that was pretty fun. Then at the same time that was happening, they were kind of starting to get crazy into Taylor Swift's new tour. So I helped out a little bit on that, but nothing too crazy. Mostly Heath was doing that. And then the first one that I really did with them that was like a actual show was Beyonce's On the Run 2 tour. So they needed some iMag effects for that. So they hired Silent Partners to send someone over to do iMag effects. And by the way, I totally missed the days of iMag effects. Can't wait to get back into that. Very easy, fun stuff.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But yeah, that was a really cool experience to see. It was an amazing stage and setup and everything. And it was really cool to be a part of that. We made some very cool looks with like fire coming off of the dancers and like crazy feedback stuff that was like tied into choreography, and it was a really cool experience to get into that. Yeah, that was kind of the first few, and then from there we did all kinds of other content for like Muse and Katy Perry. We do a lot of stuff for Katy Perry. Pretty much all the stuff that you see live is most of it is ours, or people that we've hired to also collaborate with us. So yeah, from there just did tons of other stuff.
Nice.
Yeah.
Killer. Yeah. So you talked a little bit about this. One of the reasons I do this series is kind of to help people kind of navigate this weird space, because I feel like we all kind of just figured it out along the way, or like, did something and it happened to work. So trying to like pin some of these things down and just give people a little tip. So you've mentioned a few of these things that have worked in like putting yourself out there and getting discovered. Early on, you were just making a fuck ton of GIFs and putting them out there, and you're meeting people and showing them your stuff in person. You're getting on like user groups of the software that you're using and talking to other users, or companies that are using this, and you're doing like the Notchmeister thing is like a contest where you're creating content with a particular tool and putting it out there, and and you're winning these things and getting some attention. Are there any other things that you've done to put yourself out there online or in person that have worked well for you?
No, I think that covers most of it. I'd say, to me, the most important one is making lots of content, and then as practice and doing it for fun as well, and kind of putting it out there even if no one's looking at it, and then getting onto those user groups and kind of showing off what you can do, helping out other people. That kind of shows that you have a really good level of knowledge, where you're kind of helping these other people through other gigs. So it kind of shows that you could handle kind of doing this kind of stuff. Yeah, I think that is a really good way to kind of find jobs. I see lots of people on these user groups getting jobs and asking. There's also now sections for asking for jobs and stuff on a lot of these user groups. And yeah, it's if you're really, really good at a niche software like Notch, or you're really into like Unreal Engine and virtual production and that kind of stuff, if you kind of find that niche group online and really show that you know what you're talking about and you can like help people through all this kind of stuff, then you can really get into it. It can be hard, I would say, with stuff like virtual production to really be able to understand everything that's going on, because there's so many different pieces of hardware and software that you would need to learn. So my advice would be to stick to a particular software and get extremely good at it. So that was kind of what happened to me with Notch. Is even though I only learned it in a few months, I knew it better than most people. So I was able to get a job very easily with that, because even though it's a super small software that nobody uses, being used on these big shows to make really cool stuff. So I was really obsessed with it, and that was able to kind of get me in the door, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that gets you in the room, and now you're have access to an insane system that you could play with and start to understand as well. One of the things that I really admire about you is this like seemingly insatiable desire and ability to just like learn new shit. And you seem to always know like some new program or new thing that's out, new technique, and you just immediately jump on and are like, I need to know about this. What is your like philosophy or strategy around that?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's always another thing kind of coming down the pipe, I feel like, and it can be hard to allocate more time to learn something new. But yeah, like was I guess almost I'd say 8 months ago we started really getting into Unreal, and it was like a whole. Even though I had done it for my thesis project, it was like, I barely really scraped the surface. I feel like no one really fully knows Unreal because it's for so many different jobs and applications. But yeah, like for me, it's still it's all about that end goal of creating audio and visuals that kind of work together and like are informed by each other. And so if I ever see another software that's getting me closer to that, or I see some amazing stuff being rendered in real time or some amazing way of controlling things, I just get obsessed with it and I have to jump into it. And yeah, the most recent stuff is definitely Unreal and Touch Designer. I had used them both a lot in the past for little things, but I never really like dive deep into them. And yeah, I feel like there's way too much to explore. I mean, I could spend all my time just on Unreal or just Touch Designer. So it's kind of difficult to kind of find the balance. But I would say that the key to like learning these things is not to just go and follow random tutorials and like see, like, that's good at first to kind of get your bearing on what the software is and what it kind of does and what the general workflows are. But once you've kind of made it past that initial stage, like really trying to have a very specific goal in mind and trying to achieve that, I think is what really allows you to learn a program and like have it sink in. So I think we've both found that it's like you never really fully learn like a workflow or a program until you're just like completely immersed in the middle of it, and you have to make it work now because now there's like, you're in the middle of a gig and you're like, damn, this has to work, so I have to figure this out. So I would recommend to people trying to learn lots of different software like this. Like, first you have to understand you can't know everything all at once. Some people can really do that well, but still I feel like you have to keep these programs in rotation, even if you don't use them all the time for your gigs. You kind of have to try to refresh yourself every now and then and try to do it, and to kind of force yourself into your own gig. If you don't have a gig that is forcing you to learn this stuff, kind of create your own so that you can, and kind of set goals so you can really try to reach that, because that's the kind of stuff that will really force you to learn the entire way through of what you want to do with it. And yeah, it can be pretty challenging and like overwhelming to dive into a completely new program, but it usually ends up working out. I would say if there's some programs I learned that then I just kind of like ditched because I found something better. Like for instance, the first node-based program I learned was VVVV because it was free and it was kind of cool, and it definitely is capable, but it doesn't really. Once you want to get kind of past the normal stuff, you have to get into shaders, and shaders are kind of where I draw the line in terms of the amount of time I'm willing to allocate to something, at least at this moment. But I like to kind of stay at a more higher level approach. I do get into lots of Python, especially with Touch Designer, but I usually just do the bare amount that I can do to actually get what I need out of it, because I'm ultimately more focused on the creative side and what I can make with the software versus continuously just spending all my time learning it. So it's really about a balance of like making stuff and learning, and keeping these programs kind of in rotation so that you can retain that knowledge, because you can get rusty on these things pretty quick. It's kind of funny. I almost felt rusty in Notch a few months ago after spending so much time in Unreal.
Yeah, so, man, I'm feeling the same way. I need to get back into it. I'm doing a project in cinema right now, and feeling the pain of render times again, but it's a familiar pain. And yeah, but Notch, I was like pushing all the wrong buttons. I'm like, I don't even remember how to navigate this thing anymore. What's going on? That's awesome. You mentioned in there like creating a gig for yourself. Have you done something like that? Do you have an example of that you can talk about?
Yeah, my kind of that kind of same personal project of like merging kind of Ableton and Notch, I guess, is the thing that kind of drove me to really get into the weeds with Notch and really get into the weeds of Maximus P as well and Ableton. And I think that was like my permanent gig for a while. And now my other personal permanent gig is doing these live streams for this website that me and my friends created called Palacio Palace. And on there we have weekly shows with different artists coming in, and I'll do the visuals on a virtual stage with virtual cameras and stuff. And I have it in Notch at the moment, and it's controlled by Unreal and Touch Designer. I mean, not Unreal, Ableton and Touch Designer. At first it was just Ableton and Notch, and then I realized like we have to get Touch Designer in here to do this. So that was kind of like one of the main pushes for me to learn Touch Designer. So I kind of was able to rope Touch Designer into there and then learn that in order to make kind of reach my goals with that project. And now kind of the next step with that is actually integrating Unreal, but also still having Notch in there as well for the things that it does best. So that kind of project, which kind of started with my thesis project, is kind of what's been my own kind of personal continuous gig that's been roping in all of these different softwares.
Yeah. Sick. Yeah. And we'll make sure to link up a bunch of these things. I know you're racing the clock to upload all the archives of those. There's like
Yeah.
way too many shows in the backlog. So there's plenty for people to watch on that channel. It's a pretty incredible artist that you've been able to pull in. How do you manage making those connections and things like that? That's sort of a sidetrack, but
yeah, actually I don't do the booking for it. My friend handles the booking, luckily, but it's pretty amazing during COVID, the amount of artists we've been able to get for that. I hope that it continues from there. We've built up a decent following with those shows, and it's mostly artists that watch the shows, actually. So mostly audiovisual artists and musicians that kind of watch the shows and are talking about like what their setup is like fully modular, or they're using Ableton and integrating. So it's always a challenge, especially another big challenge to that people don't realize is actually getting these artists up and running to do a live show, like with OBS and stuff. And they usually have very complicated audio setups as well that might not necessarily lend themselves to being able to be broadcasted live. Especially with Ableton, you have to kind of route through a virtual audio device, and it's a little bit different if you want no delay, and it's pretty complicated technically to set up. But yeah, luckily my friends are able to handle that and get all the booking done. And it's been amazing, the people that we've been able to book. Like we got Daedalus for our show last year, which was really cool. And we have a bunch of other really awesome artists that we're really proud to have on the show. And some of them too, that like have had their first performances on our show, or some of the most impressive as well. Like I feel like there's a lot of people on there that will be bigger in the future because they have some incredibly amazing performances. And it's really cool. It's very surprising sometimes when you book them and you don't really know what to expect. You've seen like a few Instagram videos from them doing some stuff, and then they get on the show and you're just like blown away. So it's really cool to see people's obsessions kind of come to life in these shows.
Yeah, it's cool. It's really cool to be able to give people a platform, and give them the space to do their thing and see what happens. It's awesome. Yeah, and I mean, this is just another testament to, I don't know even what to call it, but this like seeming unending energy that you have, that you're through full-time employment and all this other stuff, just like putting on a weekly show with like a handful of artists every week, with this system that I like design and maintain and develop like throughout the past year. No big deal. It's just this extra thing I'm doing. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, it's quite a handful for sure. Trying to develop that at the same time as we're doing these really big gigs. Luckily, there's some breaks in between the gigs where I can really dive in and try to make the next like version of it and then implement it. Unfortunately, this new stage that I've been making in Unreal has been taking way too long, but it's getting close to the end. I kind of keep discovering new things I want to put into it, and then it kind of just keeps delaying it further and further. But yeah, it's very difficult to kind of juggle and maintain all the time between these things. It gets a bit overwhelming, but then again, having that, like, you have a deadline every week that you need to make this show happen, and so you can kind of use the same system, but there's still stuff we're adding into it. And then also every week we put out a poster. I make the poster a notch, so that's been kind of a really nice continuous thing. And maybe it's still, even though I'm using Unreal for all this stuff we're doing at work, it's been good to kind of keep that continuous thing with Notch going with these shows and with those posters as well.
Yeah, it's a great point. Having the deadline and having a couple other people involved, so you can't skimp out on the deadline, does a lot for motivation, for sure. Like you'll figure it out. You'll get something out and ready in time because you have to. So in the past, I've been talking to a lot of freelancers in other episodes, and you and Heath, you're kind of in an interesting arrangement, but you're pretty, for all intents and purposes, you're pretty much full time at Silent Partners. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, that's true for the most part. We have like a contract that is just a rolling contract with them. So we hire ourselves, but then our own LLCs hire us. So that we are continuously employed.
With a company in Canada as well. Like there's some, you got to get fancy with the business to just make that happen. But how do you find, I mean, this is kind of it's pretty much your only gig since college, right? You've been full-time with them pretty much since graduation?
For the most part. I have done a few other small gigs, but they weren't creative. They're mostly setting up like systems for different like installations. Like it was actually just kids' rooms, but they're full projected installations all over buildings. I kind of took that on as well, just because I wanted to learn what it's like to set up, to spec out an entire installation like that. I didn't really know how when I took it, but I was like, they thought that I could figure it out, and so I did.
Nice. That's the way to do it. So usually I'm asking freelancers about, what did they do that helped them to kind of survive this past year? And I'm curious to ask you about that too, because I think there were some interesting things that happened in your year as well, and with the companies that you work for. Maybe and I just think it'll be a little different to see how was that experience for you, being a full-time employee?
Yeah, it was interesting at the start of all this. We really didn't know what was going to happen because, the company I work for is almost all graphics for live events. We don't really do many music videos. We've done some music videos, but everything is pretty much relying on those in-person shows. And we kind of had one gig that we were still wrapping up. So we kind of had a few weeks of like kind of time after everything shut down where we could continue some work. And then after that, it was like, okay, well, I don't know what's going on now, but luckily they had kind of planned for stuff like this. They were able to keep everyone paid for the most part. In Canada, the laws were even better for getting pay during this time. So, but luckily we didn't have to go and get unemployment here in Los Angeles, because we eventually went into this whole XR world and started this whole thing, which the first one was the Katy Perry American Idol finale video. And that was really interesting. That was the first gig we kind of did during COVID. It was kind of crazy to see, all the protocols in place and all that stuff, but also it was the beginning of this insane adventure that is XR. And it was definitely one of the most difficult gigs I think we've ever done as well, because we had never even really done anything with XR. We'd done some small kind of demos at Disguise's space in Los Angeles, some really, really basic stuff, but not really. And then, we just got thrown into this insane gig with Katy Perry, and it was kind of a make it or break it situation where if we make this work, we can create a ton of work for lots of other people doing all this crazy stuff. And if not, then it's like, I don't even know what's going to happen. And luckily it all worked out through the technology and the content we were able to pull through at the pretty much the last minute. And it was quite an adventure. And it was pretty stressful too, especially towards the end, but it was totally worth it. And it was a really cool thing to be a part of. And then since then, we've been pretty busy throughout COVID, and we've been able to hire lots of other content studios as well to help us out with all this stuff. So it's been really great that all worked out. It definitely was a more difficult year than usual for us. I was actually, I would say, busier this year than I had been other years, which is kind of crazy and definitely not how it was for a lot of people this year. So I'm pretty grateful for that. But also, it was a bit more difficult as well. I think there was a lot more work to be done and a lot more new things to learn and kind of get through and kind of learn on the fly. So there was a lot more. There was a lot more involved this past year for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I started getting involved in the XR thing after a few shows later. I sort of was introduced to that world by that Katy Perry project, like I think a lot of people were. And then started learning as fast as I could and started talking to all you guys. And yeah, super grateful that XR is a thing, because I don't know what the hell I'd be doing if I wasn't doing that. There's no shows. It is super interesting, but it's been kind of difficult because you're not just doing the thing that you've spent years being good at, now you're like doing the thing that's just out of reach of all that, because you're pretty close to it, but we're all going to figure it out, hopefully, by the time the camera's rolling.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about the how that first XR project started, and like how the partnership, like how Silent Partners got roped into it, and how like you and Heath kind of became the people at Silent Partners who were gonna like make this thing happen. That's a fair thing to say.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, the reason Heath and I were kind of doing this because we're kind of the real-time experts, I would say, at Silent Partners, and kind of the main people for Notch. There are some other people that are a little bit better at Unreal, but we were really, really good with Notch, and that was kind of the easiest way that we could actually create an XR project. It was pretty crazy kind of jumping into that once we received kind of the creative requests. I think I want to say we had like less than 2 weeks to do that whole project, which is pretty typical of a touring kind of, or like a thing. Like a lot of the gigs we do, it's like, yeah, you got like 2 weeks. Sometimes you have a bit more to kind of prep stuff, but like the real work happens basically within 2 weeks. And when we saw the creative proposals for that, we were kind of like, okay, well, let's see how this goes. And we didn't really know kind of what to expect or what we could realistically achieve. We kind of knew we could achieve some of these effects with Notch, but we didn't really know too much about front plate, back plate separation, all that kind of stuff. That was all very new to us, and really one of the bigger challenges like that in performance, especially with an XR system, was really difficult to manage. And another thing on top of that is collaboration is very difficult to manage with Notch specifically, since it's very tied into a single project file. So that was one of the biggest challenges with that as well, was kind of because these XR projects kind of are so much bigger than just making content. So you really have to, you really need to collaborate. It's hard sometimes for just one person to create the entire piece of content. So yeah, we had some other Cinema 4D artists as well. Patrick Goski helped us out with a lot of the Cinema 4D stuff, and then we had to be able to integrate that into Notch and put the entire thing together and animate all the keyframes and actually get it to perform, which is always a difficult challenge, unfortunately, especially with Notch. Yeah, it was quite an adventure, and then from there, I believe that XR Studios was formed right before they shot that gig. It was kind of a bigger decision, I think, with the Silent House as well, which is a large production company that we work with a lot. And yeah, from there we got tons of other gigs and shows and XR shoots basically. But it's been a learning experience ever since. I wouldn't say that we just like figured out XR during Katy Perry, and then from there it was like all easy. Like it's always ever changing, becoming more and more difficult. And obviously you know this, but yeah, it's a consistent adventure every time. You can never really expect things to work.
Yeah. You
really have to be on edge, always waiting for something to break and something new to break every time, which is always interesting. It's one thing to just make a piece of content or an audio reactive effect with Notch. It's another thing entirely to create a world that can be explored through an XR system. And you have to take into account lots of different things. Like they could point the camera anywhere they want, you know, like you might have planned out kind of these camera shots ahead of time, but ultimately when you're there and shooting with the director, they're going to be pointing the camera all kinds of these different ways, and you're going to have to fill those holes and do all that kind of stuff to make it work. And then on top of that, you have to manage performance. You're like, want to add some new creative stuff, but it's going to interfere with the performance and all that kind of stuff. So it's a whole nother ball game in terms of real-time design. And we were just kind of discovering that then. And because of that, we have a lot of experience with it at this point. And so we've been able to kind of continue that and keep pushing it forward.
Yeah, that is an interesting observation. There's some pretty huge differences in the way that you work with like an XR project and like your traditional music content project. Like they're so fast that you want one person to be able to do everything. So a tool like Notch is perfect for that, because you can just like throw some cinema assets in there and like start to finish, throw something together in one project. You got the particles in there, the lighting, everything. And then also a lot of the cheats that you do, like only putting objects in front of where the camera's going to go so you could save performance and things like that, are kind of out the window. Like you need to build out a 360 scene just in case, because you never know, they might want to pull out 3,000 feet into the air and do some crazy shot, and you're like, now I got to build a waterfall. All right, cool, let's do it. Yeah, it's a wild new world. Wow. Yeah, awesome. Let's see. Let's do a couple of rapid fire things, and then we'll give our parting message to the internet. Let's see. Rapid fire. What is your render engine of choice?
I would say Notch is still my favorite.
Okay.
Unreal is best for really high quality, crazy stuff, foliage, clouds, water, all that kind of stuff is going to look better in Unreal. If you want to actually get something done and get it done fast and explore the creative process and have fun and play around, then Notch is definitely the way to go for creating content.
Do you have a favorite Notch node or system of nodes?
I would say the procedural stuff is the most fun. Yeah. The procedural shading stuff, I would say, is the most unexplored and people don't really know about those, I would say you should try to mess with those if you can, because those are fun.
Awesome. Is there Notch doesn't really do plugins, but is there a plugin or other sort of like secret weapon tool that you enjoy using in any program?
Yes, actually, I would say with Notch, there is something I use that's external. I actually made my own hotkey system for interfacing with Notch that is similar to how in Cinema you can press like different keys and it'll pop up with other keys that you could press to drop or like switch to different tools. I kind of built that in Notch because I was frustrated with how hard it is to kind of drop in nodes. You have to go search for them and all that stuff. And I made it like maybe 2.5 years ago, and it's still like the single thing that like I know how to use that. If I get onto someone else's computer and I don't have my whole hotkey system, it's like I'm not even using Notch anymore. So it's kind of funny. So I can't really say, oh, go out and download this, but if you ask for it, I can provide it. It's been posted on the Facebook group before, and I keep it updated for every single new Notch version that comes out.
How did I not know about this? You've been holding out on me. Yeah, you're getting an email later. I need that. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
That was one of the things that I was tripping over when I went back into Unreal or back into Notch. I was like, I need to go click in this thing and type the name of the node that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And the same thing in like Redshift, the material, the shader graph. I'm like, why can't I just right click or like just start typing something? Just let me start typing. Man,
yeah, okay. I know they're working on a new UI update and hopefully it'll get better. Yeah, there's other people that have made other hotkey systems as well. I think Martin Winged on the Facebook group also made a pretty extensive system, but yeah, hopefully they're going to update their UI and make it a little bit better. I always say that Touch Designer has it down and that everyone should copy Touch Designer. So
yeah, Touch is really nice. What did you make that plugin thing in?
I used AutoHotkey, which is a like a program for writing hotkey scripts, but you can also have it pop up a tooltip, is what it's called in Windows, where it kind of pops up a little like text window, and you can populate things in that text window. I made it so it'll kind of wait for you to press a key, and then it'll put down the text window, and then it pastes in the node that you selected. So in this script, I've like copied using a Control U and Control I. You can copy the nodes to the clipboard, and then I put those into the script, so it'll paste those nodes, and it'll put them into the clipboard, and then paste them into my node graph. So they're actually like they already have the settings that I would like the default settings that I would like from the node when they get dropped in as well. So it just completely opened up my whole workflow. And I started doing that stuff with the Stream Deck, and that was kind of like my gateway into that. And then I realized that we could do this all with like I don't even have to reach over to the Stream Deck. I want to be able to keep my hands on the keyboard and mouse, and I started to like take into account like where like I can use my left hand because it's always going to be there, and my right hand will always be on the mouse. So it's like kind of organizing these things to be as ergonomic and quick as possible. It kind of became an interesting design challenge for myself, and it is really worth it. I feel like it allows me to get to play with Notch faster and get what I wanted to do much faster and more fluidly. And it's amazing kind of have that connection with the software at that point where it can be like all muscle memory. To the point where I can't even tell you what the keyboard combinations are. I just like know like where they are, you know. It's kind of funny. I have to actually look into my script sometimes to remind myself it's been a while.
Just fully jacked in. Man, that's awesome. I never think to do things like that. Like I was blown away when I was watching some like Premiere tutorial and they did a similar thing. They moved all the important hotkeys to the left hand. And I was like, that's genius.
It's kind of funny. Yeah. Like you don't really think of it of like saving a lot of time, but it really does.
It does. It really does. And the one thing I was always like nervous about, I'm like, I should just learn the real ones in case I need to like go into a studio, or like I do a lot of work in studios where I go in, work on their system with their version of the software and like do it, and spending half a day setting up all your presets and download, importing your key map preferences and stuff is like, seems like a thing, but if it saves you half a day over the course of a week, that's pretty, I guess it's worth it. I don't know. Interesting thing to think about. That's sick though. Super impressive. Let's keep going with the rapid fire stuff. Any and this can be visual, music, whatever, a hardware interface that you are excited about.
I don't know. I really like my APC40. I think that's a great tool. I'd like something nicer. Yeah, I don't know.
The common answer. Are you on the Mark II life or the original?
I have the Mark II. The original one just wouldn't fit in my other stuff.
So
I
big.
also want to say I'm obsessed with touchscreens. I have 2 touchscreens in front of me and then an iPad as well. And the iPad, I would say, was one of my best purchases for controlling visuals that I ever did. I didn't really think it would be such a big part of my workflow as it became. But I got an iPad Pro for about $300, like the original iPad Pro used. And man, I use that thing a ton for controlling visuals. I use Max MSP to create the interfaces instead of something like TouchOSC, because it allows me to have like easier kind of feedback and really control what I'm seeing and like give me feedback about where the values are and what I can do and really customize it. And that thing has been so useful to me. So I highly recommend if you can use a touchscreen for your shows and everything. An iPad Pro is actually an amazing tool. And yeah, the APC40 Mark II is great. I would actually say, in terms of control surfaces, I'm going to go on a stretch here and say Ableton is my favorite because I use it as a controller for to control other things with OSC. So it's nice. And the cool thing is that you can use a controller to control that controller to control other stuff. So the APC40 can move through all the different tracks, and in each track I have different Max MSP devices that then are sending OSC signals to Touch Designer and Unreal and Notch to do different things, and also lighting software as well. So I really like to be able to do that because then it gives me a place to organize all my other controllers and sequence them and control them and set presets for them. So it's really cool. And then with that, you could use, a push, you could use like a launch pad, you could use whatever you want to control all of your visuals like that. So it's pretty cool.
Nice. Hell yeah. Let's see. A visual artist, your favorite visual artist at the moment?
I don't know. One that comes to mind that I don't feel like it gets a lot of attention is this really strange artist called Kim Lawton. Makes some really weird, very strange, kind of off-putting art pieces. Lots of them with Unreal recently. And they kind of almost fall into the category of Demoscene. I want to also put out there, Demoscene is really cool if you guys, if any of you guys use real-time software and real-time rendering and you aren't aware of the Demoscene and the really cool stuff that's been coming out of there since the days of Amiga, it's definitely worth checking out. It just really quickly, it's essentially a competition for people to create programs that run graphics and music in real time, and it has to be in real time. And they have limitations on how big the programs can be, all the way down to like 256 bytes if they want. So like whatever is the craziest thing you can create that is only 256 bytes. So like smaller than like any text file or anything, and it's just insane. And actually Notch is what came out of the Demoscene as a demo tool. So it was created with that purpose in mind and then eventually developed into a professional tool. So I would look at some really cool, there's lots of amazing Demoscene artists out there, and they're still doing it, even though kind of like Notch and Unreal have kind of taken over. It's really cool to see these insane custom render engines that people build just for showing off the crazy shit that they can make. It's pretty insane.
Yeah. Some of the ones that you showed me are nuts, like unbelievable, especially those super small file size ones. I'm like, how it just breaks my brain thinking of how that's even possible. Um, and yeah, you can go down a pretty deep rabbit hole searching for some of that stuff, and really crazy. Definitely check that out. I'll put some links to a few things down below. Hashtag YouTube. Awesome. Is there a music artist that you're stoked on right now?
Um, yeah, I've been getting more into, well, I've been into Madlib and like J Dilla for a long time. I've been listening more to that recently. I'm a big fan of Death Grips, Flying Lotus, um, Igloo Ghost is really cool. I like a lot of the more kind of experimental stuff as well. Um, yeah, there's a lot of artists. It's kind of interesting because there's a lot of artists I would like to work with, but they don't like have the crazy budget that you would actually get to do something that I would actually like to do, which is kind of insane. Sophie was one of the artists I'd always wanted to be able to work with, but unfortunately that will never happen. But yeah, I was really obsessed with her music as well. She's really, really cool stuff.
Yeah, yeah, definitely very cool. Like aesthetic to visual style to everything.
Yeah.
Um, hell yeah. Uh, ooh, another thing I wrote this down that I wanted to ask you about. Uh, People who've not worked with Spencer might not know this, but he has a full-on tea setup on his desk at all times, and occasionally you'll hear a couple times a day a the steam pouring out of the kettle, and he'll start making himself some tea. He's got a pretty sweet setup. Tell us about the interest in tea. Where does this come from? When did you get into it, and what are you drinking right now?
Yeah, so I would say it was about 3 or 4 years ago. My friend Andy from Korea, he got me this tea set, like a Japanese tea set, like a proper one. And I was kind of into tea before then, but not really super obsessed with it. And after I got that tea set and I was able to like properly make Japanese tea, like green tea, like sencha and and matcha and stuff like that. I started to get really obsessed with it, and then from there, I started looking into Chinese teas, and I've been really obsessed with those for the past few years, and just trying all kinds of different teas, from pu'er tea to like oolongs and all kinds of weird fermented teas with like fungus growing on them. Like it's crazy all the kinds of stuff that they come up with in China to make like new crazy exotic flavors, and they like age the teas and try to ferment them to like accelerate the aging process. And it's just amazing all the kind of stuff they try to create there. And I'm not a huge fan of coffee. Like I like the taste of it. It doesn't really agree with me, and I've never really been that passionate about it. And it's like a bit too much caffeine for me generally as well. So that kind of led me into tea, and yeah, I've gotten way too obsessed with it. It's kind of become one of my other obsessions. And currently, I'm drinking a. Let me see, actually, what is? I think I have it right here. It's a ripe pu'er tea cake from Yunnan sourcing. And if you guys have never seen a tea cake before, it comes like pressed into a it's steam pressed into this like kind of cake looking thing. And it's like a hard brick of like tea. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but this is what it actually looks like. And then you have to split off from there pieces of it, and it's really good stuff. It has a very like kind of like bold and kind of like sweet taste to it. It can be very coffee like actually this particular tea, but yeah, there's not too many other people in the business that have like a full like gong fu tea setup with like a tea tray and like everything all ready to go. So it definitely gets some weird looks sometimes, but I don't really care because I enjoy it.
Yeah, hell yeah, got to do
Yeah.
what you enjoy, and I like stuff like that. The tea set is a good one. I was on set one time with this guy Lee Duck. He's a lighting guy, lighting programmer and designer, and he brings a fuck ton of plants to the gig and just sets up front of house with like all these plants and like a fucking uh uh like a what's the fucking like an oil diffuser. It's like everything
Oh yeah.
smells nice. It's like being in a chill like Zen garden. It's pretty cool. I like things like that. It's memorable and it makes for a comfortable atmosphere.
Yeah, it's kind of cool to create a little atmosphere with your desk at these, even though it's like just a temporary little setup for a few weeks. It's nice to kind of have that kind of stuff you're normally used to there with you. It definitely makes it all worth it.
Yeah. The lava lamps at XRS are
Yeah.
kind of a little touch of that as well. I like those set the vibe. Um, Killer. Well, this has been awesome. Is there any like one last piece of advice or something you would tell to somebody who is interested in getting into this field? Like, what's that one thing that they might think about or do that might help them be successful?
Yeah, I think kind of what we touched on earlier, just making a bunch of stuff, hosting it somewhere, and then getting on those user groups and helping out people, showing off your work. I think there's way more important people in those user groups than you probably think, that are looking at what you're making. And if they see you helping out other people and you're making really cool stuff, like you're guaranteed to get a job, I think. So that's my main piece of advice. And definitely take on your own, like make your own gigs for yourself if you don't have one, to like really push yourself to learn these programs. I feel like having just a passion to try to reach a certain goal is really gonna push you to kind of learn what you want to learn out of these programs and get jobs doing similar stuff. So yeah, that would be my main piece of advice.
Oh yeah. And where can people find more about you or the work that you're involved in online in the internet?
Yeah, I have an Instagram, Automata Graphics. And then on the Palacio Palace Instagram, I think is where you'll see all of the most recent stuff that I've been making for their show. So all of the visuals and everything is all done by me. And sometimes I have other people help me out run the visuals. But yeah, that's been all me. I also have a website that I haven't updated in forever, which is sirspence.com. I'll probably update at some point, but I can't really put any of the shows that I've worked on in the past like few years on any of that stuff because it's all kind of under wraps. But that's the way it goes.
Yeah, that's life working for pop stars. And yeah, and the company you work for,
Yeah.
Silent Partners Studio,
Yep.
and
Yep. And XR Studios.
Yeah, XR
through
stuff,
Silent
XR
Partner Studios. Yeah. Yeah. So definitely check out the XR Studios Instagram if you haven't. Lots of really cool stuff we're working on there.
Oh yeah. Yeah, awesome. Well, this has been really cool. Thank you so much,
Cool.
Spencer. Hell yeah.
Great. Thanks for having me, man.